Okay, so we are running into problems because when we look at our JSON data, we have nested JSON data. We don't just have a location. Like if I'm looking at just this location, my decoding would have worked just fine. So if I was looking at just the highlighted part of it, I would have had my decoder set up. I could decode into a location. So for that one part, I can have this application working just great. Here's the rub, though, is I need to deal with this postal codes label or property of my JSON data. Like I have to. I don't think it's part of my location. Like I don't want the label there. So I have to deal with it. And then the other factor that's going to cause problems for me is I only have one location because I've filtered it to say I only want the locations for that zip code in the United States. I only have one location, but the result is always going to be an array of these location objects. So I have really two separate problems. One is that it's nested under that postal codes label. And then secondarily, I don't have a single location. I have an array of locations. The array of locations is not really that big a deal. Right? So we can deal with that pretty easily. So if I come over to the view controller and say, oh, I have an array of locations, that's pretty easy to deal with. Right? Now I have an array of locations, and then I just want the first entry. Okay, so I could do that. Why is it not allowing me to do that? Oh, sorry. An array of locations. Okay. Great, that's fine, but it doesn't take care of our label problem. Right? So I still have that label that's sitting in front of my array of locations. So here's how we solve it. This is the easy way around it. Is instead of saying I have an array of locations when I decode the data, what if I have a dictionary that is a label followed by my array of locations? So I'm going to decode this object into a dictionary because that's what I have. Like that's what my JSON object is. It's a dictionary. So I translate JSON objects, the curly braces in JSON, to dictionaries in Swift. So I'm going to have a dictionary that has one key value pair. The key value pair is postal codes. And then on the right-hand side is an array of locations. Does that make sense? So when I decode this data, my decoding is going to be, I want a dictionary. Okay, so this nesting looks a little bit crazy. And the dictionary is going to be a string followed by an array of locations. So my key is a string, postal codes, uppercase string, followed by, so my key is a string, postal codes, my value is the array of location objects. Everyone okay with that? Let's try it. Postal codes, cool location. And then I actually get the actual raw data. That's what that string is. Life's good there, right? My decoding worked. Like it didn't crash. When I say life's good, my decoding didn't crash. If it does crash, remember how we were going to handle that? So instead of trying to decode this, so when my decoding was crashing and I had it wrong, so initially I set it up as just saying, hey, I'm expecting an array of location objects. I think that what I got was unhelpful. So if I say I want an array of location objects and I try to convert that into a location info, it's going to fail. Like we know that it's going to fail. We looked at it, we changed it over to a dictionary, and then it seemed to be working. I don't think this error message is all that useful. And I didn't even get an error message. I just got the string response. I'm not getting anything about some cool location. This failed. But I don't get any information about why it failed. Yeah, so how do we do that? We did that last week, right? So when I try this, I'm basically saying try to do this, and if it doesn't work, then just, okay, ignore it. That's fine, but in development, I'd really like to know what caused it not to work, right? Like, I think programmatically, this is ultimately the end result of where we want to be. If we try to decode it and it fails, then we can just keep moving. But I'm in development right now, and maybe my development is what's causing it not to work, and I can change it. And I'm in the development process. I want to know what the error was that caused me not to be able to decode this. So how do I do that? So I have an error callback, but the error is the error is not on my data task. So I have data. You're seeing that the data came back. The error is on me trying to decode this. Like, that's where it's failing, and I have this conditional saying, hey, try that, but if it doesn't work, then I don't really care. Like, that's essentially what my code is saying. I don't want that. So instead, what I want to do is I want to say, do this thing. I want to let the location information equal. I'm no longer trying it. I'm saying do this. And then I can catch my exception.
So if you write it in line, it's a try. If you want to get a message back, you have to use do and catch.
Right. So I still have to try this, and it'll throw the exception, but now I'll catch it.
Why don't you just use try?
Why not just use try catch, yeah. Right? Yep.
That's right.
Okay, so now I'm going to print out the error. And this error object is built into the catch block. I don't have to catch a variable and use that. And I'm not logging the location info. So I'm just going to print the location info. Interesting that the indentation is wrong. Okay, so I print the location info. I'm not going to get the location info. I'm going to get the error. Right? Because we know that the decode wasn't working based on me trying to decode to an array of location objects. It's not going to work. So I'm going to get the error message. And then I actually get something useful. Swift decoding error, context. Expected to decode to an array, but found a dictionary instead. I don't know that that error is useful, but I've seen it so many times. Like, what it's telling me is that if I look at the JSON data, I have a dictionary. I have an object. It's a key with a value on the right-hand side. Like, I don't write my JSON data this way. Like, if I was going to build an API, this is not the way I would handle it. If I was going to build an API, I would return the data. And let me toggle this off wrap. I would have returned this array. Yeah. I don't need the label. You call it whatever you want. You made the request to the API, and I'm sending you back the data. Like, why is the API labeling it? Yeah. I don't know.
Sending back a single packet is kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I can send back this array. Right? Like, so if I send back the array as a string, like, personally, if I'm building an application, I'd prefer the API to send it back this way. Here's the data that you asked for, but don't put a label on it. I'm going to call it what I want. But instead, what this API did is it said, oh, no, I'm sending you back postal codes. And it wrapped that object around it. I wouldn't have built it that way, but they did. And now I'm stuck dealing with it. So because they put that label on my data that I asked for, now I have to deal with it as a dictionary. Now it's a key value pair. It's the key, whatever they named it, with the value being the locations that I care about. Okay, that's where this error message is coming in. expected an array, but found a dictionary. The reason I'm getting that, though, is because I said I expect an array back. Like, I'm trying to decode this into an array of location objects. I can't because of that front label saying, hey, you know, you have these postal codes. Okay, fine. I'll deal with it as a dictionary. This is the easiest way to deal with it. Okay, so I'm going to deal with it as a dictionary. So I'm going to have a string that stores a collection of location objects. That's the object that I'm decoding into. Okay, and now because I've done that, now I can see, like, I'm not going to get the error message anymore. I'm going to get the location info. It says, oh, I have one location, which is cool location. If I didn't restrict this to the United States, okay, so I take off the United States restriction. I think it gives me more than one location. So I run it again, and you'll see when I decode it, I'll have cool location, cool location. Excuse me. So I have two different locations. Like, cool location is not a great description, but I have two cool locations now because it converted it into a dictionary, postal codes, and then an array of different locations. Looks like a Swedish name with what are those called? Umlauts?
Yeah, umlaut, yeah.
Umlaut.
These are in German too.
Type in the Latin long, so we should get it.
Yeah, you can punch in the latitude, longitude coordinates and see where it is.
There you go. It is.
SE is Sweden, huh? I would have gone with SWE.
Yeah,
Like, can I have 3 characters?
this is a totally different set.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're able to decode this information. I need to be able to pull out my location information. So great, we're successfully decoding it, but I think the next step is, hey, you know, I have my location information. I have what I need. So I'm going to put the country back in. I have what I need. But what I really care about, so let's fix the description too, so I don't want just cool location. I'm going to actually return some stuff like, I can't remember what we care about. So state, I guess, is the outermost, so I'll say state, self.state, new line, place name, self.placename, and then latitude and longitude. So lat, and then longe, okay, so now that I'm getting that description, let's go back to our view controller. I no longer want to print this string, so I'm not just going to convert the response and output the response. I think that's helpful. So if you want to use it for your project, keep it there and you can see the output so you can make sure that you are getting output. But I don't think it makes sense once we know that we're able to decode it and we're able to get the location information. So now when I run this, you'll see I just get this array and that location has my Verona location. Okay, so I have that. That's coming from the description, right? But I still have this dictionary. I need to get into the dictionary, and then I need to get into the first element in the dictionary. So I have a dictionary that says, here's my postal codes, and then I want the first postal code. Okay, so let's print just the latitude and longitude. So I'm no longer just going to use the description. I want to go to the location info, postal codes, and I want the first one, and I want the latitude. And then I want to do the same thing for the longitude. It says, hey, that's optional. So location is optional. So I can do something like if I can decode that, then I know that I have a location info object. Well, it's not going to let me do that with the optional type.
Well, I mean, in your object, you do have default values, so you could force and wrap it. And this set defaults, so there's going to be something there.
Yeah. I just don't want to deal with it here. Location must be unwrapped. All right. It still won't let me just unwrap it. Oh. And then I went too far when I'm deleting it. What am I getting here? I don't think I have an extra argument in the call. What's that? I can't hear you.
Brackets around
Oh,
after data.
thank you. Yeah, I was trying to put that conditional in, but the only way it's going to allow me to do that if let is if I have an optional object. There we go. I think I just want this. Can I use optional chaining? Why can't I do this? I think I need it here. This is optional. I'm okay with this warning. I guess I could force on. Nah, I don't want to do that. I'm good with it just giving me the warning. It's complaining about me outputting a double latitude and longitude, and I'm okay with that. And I'm not getting any data now. Oh, finally I did. It was just slow. I don't know why it was so slow the first time.
Oh, it printed it twice because you clicked it twice.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah, it was really slow the first time. I was kind of surprised how long it took to respond the first time. Yeah. And these are optional, these latitude and longitude, and it's complaining because I said it's optional so that I could output the double. I have latitude and longitude coordinates, finally, right? Now I know that I am going to have a weather URL, and I don't like this indentation. Now I can say, okay, based on that, I have a weather URL. And the weather URL that I'm going to want to use is if I go back over to my browser, I have this nearby weather. I have the latitude and longitude coordinates. These are the Verona coordinates that I was just using, so they match the latitude and longitude that you're seeing. I I'm just going to say I want a URL that has this string. And again, I'm just hard coding in the latitude and longitude coordinates. I have the latitude and longitude coordinates. This is what I'm going to use. That one, that one. They're going to go here and here. I need to embed those values. So I would just escape them in this string. So backslash, parens. Okay, so I have this weather URL. I'm going to make another data request. So now it's no longer a location task, it's a weather task with my weather URL. And I'm going to have this closure here. I'm going to get this data, response and error. Your code's going to go here. You're going to have the same problem of encoding this data. Except it's a little bit different, right? Like this problem's a little bit different. I have a dictionary that contains only a single weather observation. So unlike when I decoded a dictionary into an array of locations, now I'm encoding a dictionary into an array of one, or into an object that is one weather observation. So I'm not going to have an array of weather observations. I'm going to decode this into one weather observation. Right? That's what the data is showing me. Does everyone understand why that's different? In this case, I have one object, right? I just have curly braces on the right-hand side of that colon. In the other data request, I had an array of those curly braces. I had the square brackets around the curly braces. So when I get my weather observation, it's a single weather observation based on a latitude-longitude coordinate. Like there is no ambiguity between, oh, the zip code can show up multiple places, like in the US and then in Sweden. Like it's a latitude-longitude coordinate, which is a specific place, which has a specific weather observation. So there's only one weather observation. It's like the most recent weather observation. So you're pulling out the temperature. Don't use Celsius, convert it. Yep. Like it's easy when it's close to 0, right? Like it's freezing, but like if you told me it was 16 degrees Celsius, I'm like, I have no idea what temperature it is.
You want a sweatshirt.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, you almost double it and add 32, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the easy rule of thumb. So 64, that'd be pretty nice. I don't know that I need a sweatshirt. Yeah. Yeah. And then I care about the wind speed. This wind direction's the one that we care about for that rotation angle. I'm going to embed that code here. So I didn't include it, but I'm going to include it. So I called it animations. So we want to take that image and transform it. Like we want the rotation angle. Oops. I'm just going to grab the whole Animate code. And you can pick out what you need from there. I don't like that indentation again. Like you'd think Xcode would be better at indenting code, but it's not. You can't read the code, right? Like a first semester student wanted help with their JavaScript code, and I'm like, I can't read this. Fix the indentation. Like, and I felt like an old curmudgeon. Like I'm not even willing to help you because you can't indent your code.
Also, get off my lawn.
Yeah. But have you ever tried to read like a complicated if-then-else block that's not indented correctly? Like it's impossible. Like I don't care how much experience you have or how much you want to help. Like I can't help you.
It's like trying to read one long paragraph. You know, like read a book that isn't broken into paragraphs. It's impossible to read.
I feel like it's like reading without commas,
Yeah.
where you completely lose context. Like I could read without paragraphs. I can't read without commas. Like it starts to not make sense. And that's how indentation is. So I don't want to text edit up. So when we decode this, it's a little bit different, right? Is everyone okay with decoding that and being a little bit different? I'm going to give you the sample code. Like I would say you're almost half done, right? Like you're probably not because you have to handle the user interface. But you're half done in terms of dealing with the API. So you have the location information. Now I need to forward that location information on to make another request to get the weather data. Like you're going to start right here. You're just going to complete this weather task. Don't forget to resume the task to start it. I always do. So it has to be after the fact. I'm not putting it in just to see how many people forget and cause themselves hours of headaches.
It just seems like such an odd place to put it, too. I mean, way down there after everything else is done.
Yeah, like, I mean, to me, it doesn't seem odd. Like, I define, like, here's what's going to happen when it completes. And then, like, I'm going to let you know everything that you need to know before I send you on your way.
I guess that's a good way to look at it. And then do it here.
But the resume throws me off. Like, how about start?
Go.
Yeah.
Is it almost like a ready function?
It's exactly like that. So like in the JavaScript world, we call it send, right? Like I'm going to send the request. We're sending the request. That's what's happening. How about send? Right? Like I mean that would make sense to me. Resume does not make sense. The other thing that you're going to run into with this animation is I cannot do that here because this is an asynchronous call. That's why we're using closures. So it won't let me update the user interface. I'll show you what I mean here. So if I just assume that my I'm going to give you an assumed wind direction. So let wind direction equal 260. Okay. So I have that assumed wind direction, and then I want to animate my wind image. So I'll go to the storyboard, put that wind image on. I don't have any image, so I want to drag an image. So I drag that wind image. I go back to the storyboard. That's going to be the image that I want to rotate. So we've already done this a little bit. But if I come back over to my attributes for that UI image, I can set it to wind. And I want to rotate it to that assumed rotation that I have. And it's complaining that I don't have enough constraints. Whatever. So it's assuming that I have this wind image and I want to be able to rotate it. So I need a reference to the wind image. Okay, I'm starting the wind image at 90 degrees, right? Like, so when I rotate it, like the wind direction, like I'm going to have to subtract off that 90 degrees. Like, so my initial wind direction is 90 degrees. And if I have to get to 260, I'm really just adding 260 minus 90. Everyone okay with that rotation? Okay, so I want to animate this, right? So I come down, we have the code already here. I'm just going to uncomment the code and make it work. Okay, so we have this animation code. I don't need to change the background color. I don't need to translate the X and Y coordinates. I just need to rotate it. And my rotation angle is not 180, it's the wind direction minus the 90. And that I do want in parentheses, right? So far, so good? Apparently not. Cannot be applied to int and double. There we go. So my wind direction's a double. Okay, it's complaining about some warnings that I have. But if I try to run this right now, I'm never resuming my weather task, so it's saying, hey, you initialize this, but you're not doing anything with it. So I hit go. And I thought I'd get an error at least, but it won't let me animate this because I'm in a background thread when I make the request. So because I'm in a background thread and I'm trying to update the user interface, the only way I can update the user interface is on the main thread. Does that make sense what I'm talking about there? So my main application's running, and then in the background I'm saying, hey, go do this thing in the background, go get that data. Like that's the code that I'm currently executing, is that stuff to go get the data. So that stuff that's going to get the data is going on, and I'm saying, okay, like I'm in that code and I'm in that background process to go get the data, and now I'm saying, hey, go back to the user interface and update the user interface. I can't update the user interface from that background process. Like that's the problem. So it's not going to happen. I thought I'd get a message about it, but I'm surprised I didn't. So in order to handle that, I have to basically say, hey, go back to the main thread and do this thing. So the way I'm going to go back to the main thread is I'm going to go to the dispatch queue, and I'm going to go to the main thread, and I'm going to say asynchronously do this thing. Okay, so I'm going to have this code, which will do this UI animation. Glad I remembered that. Otherwise, you would have been like, this isn't working. I would have felt bad about not showing you that one. So now I'm still not getting this rotation. Why am I not getting this rotation? Because I never send the request, so I never get into my callback.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's resume this.
You didn't resume the thing you never did.
I didn't want to, but I was thinking I should have got an error, and I think I will. So if I pull this back out of that main thread, so now it's working, right? Like now it rotates the wind direction. But if I pull out this threading, the error is pretty good. It tells you I can't update the main user interface from a background thread. So now I get this error, and if I scroll all the way up to the top, UI API called on a background thread. Like knowing that you can't update the user interface from a background thread, like this is a pretty decent error. But you might not have known that you couldn't update the user interface from a background thread, but you can't.
Is there a reason to do that? Is just so it's always responsive?
Yeah, so the screen's always responsive, so it's always non-blocking.
Right. So like if for some reason you went off and that API took a minute to respond, it wouldn't freeze your screen.
Right. That's exactly what's going on.
Now those resumes, do those have to be nested in there? Because it almost looks like you can do a resume outside of that nesting, right?
So I have the weather task defined.
Yeah.
And I basically say, here's what should happen with the weather task. I give you all the information, and then that's when I start it up. So I have to complete the weather task definition first before I can resume it.
So weather task dot resume would be later on.
It could be later on. Could be later on. There's ways to return these values. So we didn't cover it today, and my guess is we won't get to it this semester, but if you look at, I think it's like chapter 5 or 6, it uses the NASA image of the day, and it actually breaks these out into their own functions where it's almost like async and await in JavaScript, where I await the response before I'd make that subsequent call. So like you'll see some escaping closures, like so you'll see like an at escaping, which is really that asynchronous process. So that the book actually does talk about like how can I go make that request asynchronously and wait on that request, which is probably a better solution to this. It's just more complicated. Okay, so if I was going to pull it out, I might look there. So if someone wants to do that, awesome. But if you don't want to do that, like again, I don't want to lay like an impossible project on you, kind of 2 weeks to go in the semester when I know that no one wants that. So we want to do this on the main thread. Okay. And then assuming we sync up with the main thread, then life's good. We can update the user interface. I don't think this is any different than what we did last week. Like we talked about encoding and decoding JSON last week. Like that's what this problem is. Like you're starting to get into closures, right? Like so when I make this data task, I didn't want to cover this before we covered closures, and we have a closure here, but the closure is kind of a small part of it. Like what should happen in that closure? What should happen when I get my data back? What should happen when I get my response so I can check status codes? What should happen when I encounter an error? Like you can deal with that. But the encoding decoding problem is tough. It takes a long time to get it right and to be comfortable with encoding and decoding, and you do it all the time. So I'm like, it's probably worthwhile to encode that dictionary or decode that dictionary because you're going to see it, even though I wouldn't necessarily send my API data the same way. Like you're going to see it, and you're going to see it with this project, so you're going to have to deal with it. Okay, I'm going to stop here for today. So next week we'll talk about system view controllers. The system view controllers only work on actual devices. Like I can't bring up my camera on the simulator. I think I can bring up a photo library on the simulator, but I can't bring up the camera. I can bring up a browser. So there's some things you can do, some things you can't. You're better off having a device next week. Okay, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to project that yet. There's got to be a way to project a device, but like I think there's tools to do it.
You need the same port, because I know you can get it that. Come on, this thing to your video and just display the screen. It doesn't help when you want to deploy this thing.
Can't you use an airplane?
Maybe.
Oh, that would work.
Yeah. Let me think about it. But like I'm going to like in order to bring up my camera, I'm going to have a device. So maybe I'll have to huddle around as we code. So we'll code and then huddle around and figure it out. So we're going to look at system view controllers and gesture recognizers. So gesture recognizers are pretty powerful, and you'll use them quite a bit actually. And I don't think the book actually covers them. I didn't see it. Unless I missed it in the book, I didn't see anywhere where the book actually covers gesture recognizers. So
I assume I'm not to use location manager to get a rotten wrong.
if you want to.
Doesn't help much if you want to get the weather for somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you already have it. So you're just doing extra work. So if you want to pull this out and use the location manager, awesome.
Overcomplicate things. I know it's
Hey.
Jerome